Okay, another tutorial. What we're going to have a look at now are the two-part question. Now, we've all seen the advantage, the disadvantage, the problem, the solution, cause, solution essays. The two-part questions, the structure is basically the same. Sentence one, you paraphrase the question according to some people, blah blah blah. Then there's usually two questions. How did this happen? What can we do? Who's responsible? How can this be solved? Etc. So it's virtually exactly the same structure as the causes and problems and solutions essay question type. So in your outline sentence, you have to briefly answer both questions. Then paragraph 2, question 1, paragraph 3, question 2. Not too taxing. So I've got a couple of examples. Now I have an example sent by a student, and we're going to have a comparison. Now the essay which they sent me is quite good. It is, as you'll see. The grammar's good, the vocabulary is good, but there's just one or two things about task achievement, as in what the question is asking, they don't quite match. So we'll take a look at that and you'll see. So let's go and take a look. Hello. So we're going to have a quick look at this two-part essay question. Now the tutorial that we're going to have a look at now is based on an essay which I was sent by a student earlier. It's pretty good, I have to say, not a lot wrong with it. The vocab grammar is pretty good indeed. Just one or 2 points about the task achievement part and the cohesion and the coherence part, which we'll see when we look at the two examples and make a comparison. So, as always, let's take a look at a possible structure that you might use at first. So, let's have a look. So, as with every question type, as you should know now, you paraphrase restate the question. According to some people, it has been argued, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Then it's the same, I mean, as you'll see, this is virtually the same as the problems, solutions, causes, solutions question type. It's virtually identical. I think it is, in fact. Anyway, so sentence 2. Briefly answer both of the questions. Now, as I've said 1,000 times, and I'll say, no doubt, 1,000 more times, first impressions count. Get that introduction. Get it short, get it concise, nail it, boom, this is what the question is. Some people think, I believe, what are you going to be talking about? What we don't want are these really vague, in this essay I'm going to look at 2 views, but I'm not going to tell you what they are. Now that's hardly an outline sentence. We want to know, we the examiner, reader, we want to know right from the start where the essay is going. Not, there's some reasons and some causes and I'll look at these and tell you a solution in the conclusion. That's not an outline. That's not. So, briefly answer both questions. The problem is, the solution is, depending on what the question is. So, for paragraph 1, exactly the same. A simple sentence that briefly answers the question. Explain some more, give an example. Again, make something up that properly supports your main idea. Paragraph 2, answer the second question. Explain it, develop it, and example. In conclusion, say what you've said. So in every essay, whether in university or here, you say what you're going to say. Introduction. You say it. Detailed reasons, examples, paragraph 2 and 3. Conclusion, say what you've said. In other words, you say the same thing 3 times. Introduction, conclusion, paragraph 2 and 3. Obviously in synonym and paraphrase, but that's it. That's the basic structure. That gives you the cohesiveness where everything is interconnected and linked. There's no ideas coming out of nowhere, and the examiner is wondering, where did this shit come from? Where did it come from? Everything is laid out, signposted, no surprises, everything's clear, boom, boom, boom. So that's basically it. So let's have a look at these two examples, and we'll see. So here we go. So the question was, it's often said, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Do you think people should adapt, let's change that, accept the culture of a country they visit? Do you think it's possible to learn a new culture without learning the language? So, should people, so I mean, you know, this first sentence, it's basically setting the scene in context. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. In other words, try and fit in, behave and do what the locals do. Okay, so should people adapt, accept the culture? Question 1 for paragraph 2. Question 2 for paragraph 3. Is it possible to learn a culture without learning the language? Now, first things to consider, it's saying, do you think? So you have to put a personal opinion here. Do you think people should? So, I think, I believe. Now, if a question said something like, should people accept? Is it possible that? That's not really asking for your opinion. Well, it is, but in an indirect way. So, what you would say there is, in this essay, I will discuss, or this essay will argue, it will be shown in this essay. So it's passive, more objective. But this is subjective because it's asking you, what do you think? So you have to say, yes, I believe, I think that this is this. Okay. So, what shall we look at first? Okay, we'll take a look at my example at first. So, well-known expression. So, sentence 1, you paraphrase the question, as always. Do I have any brew left? No, I haven't. So, the well-known expression, when in Rome, is usually taken to mean that a person should respect and adapt to local customs when visiting a new place. Okay. Sentence 2, what do I think? And what am I going to talk about? So you've got to briefly answer the questions. Now, you can do 2 separate sentences, or you could put it as a main clause, a subordinate clause of a single sentence. It doesn't matter really, just as long as the ingredients are in place. So I think that travellers should not only understand this, but should research such customs before they travel to avoid any cultural misunderstandings. So that's question 1. I would also argue, because it says, do I think it's possible? I would also argue that as language and culture are interconnected, only a superficial understanding of any culture is possible without knowing the language. Now, this is a very well-known debate in English language teaching and in other things too, the interconnection of language and culture. So that's what that is talking about. So, paragraph 2 is answering question 1. So we're basically going to be saying, briefly answer the question, explain, and give an example that illustrates that point. So, when travelling, tourists should remember they are guests in that country and they need to be sensitive to local customs, etc. Okay. Now, every sentence has to move the argument along a little bit. The criteria, which I'm not going to talk about again, says logical progression. This leads to this, leads to this, leads to that. So, visitors have no automatic right to behave as they would at home. Yet many tourists fail to find out what is acceptable in the places they visit. Okay. Many Westerners like to drink alcohol and dress in revealing garments, especially in hot weather. However, in some parts of the world, this behaviour would be perceived as an insult to the host population. In the Middle East, for example, try wearing a bikini, walking down the street, drinking a beer, see what happens to you. So, for example, a survey by hoteliers in Dubai. Now, I'm not sure if Dubai is a good one or not, but as I've mentioned 1,000 times, IELTS is not a truth test. It's not a test of truth, right? So you can make things up. So as long as the example is plausible, it doesn't actually matter if it's not true, just as long as it looks like it could be true. And this one seems quite fair, you know. Overconsumption of alcohol and guest wearing, blah, 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 were number one causes of complaint. So that's not too bad. So in terms of the structure, we've got, this is a little bit long, I've got 4 sentences there, but still, it's the general idea. This leads to this, leads to this. Here's an example that illustrates my point. So, question 2, is it possible to learn a new culture without learning the language? Let's see. So, sentence 1, main idea, explain, example. So, as well as respecting cultural sensitivities, another question is, can an outsider really understand a new culture while also speaking the language? The answer is that without language, only a shallow, superficial knowledge of any culture is possible. For many tourists, this is perfectly fine as they're only passing through, rushing from one tourist hotspot to another. A made-up example. For example, as The Lonely Planet, which is, if you don't know, it's a well-known series of guidebooks, website survey shows many expats and long-term residents choose to learn at least somewhat of a local language as they want a real, authentic cultural experience beyond the surface comprehension experienced by tourists. So, that basically answers that one. No. If you don't learn a language, you only get a very shallow perception of culture, which is no culture at all. So, in conclusion, respecting the cultural practices of a host country is very important. It is recommended that visitors should research what these are before travelling. So, we're essentially, as I mentioned, we're restating the introduction. So, you're saying the same thing 3 separate times. Here, conclusion, and paragraph 2 and 3 in synonym. Also, I say, also, at least attempting to master some of the language is a must to truly appreciate another culture and its traditions. So, I've answered both questions. I've restated it. Both the questions are there. Both the questions are there. Paragraph 2. So let's have a look at this again. Research such customs, cultural misunderstandings. What's acceptable? Misunderstandings, an insult to the host, cause of complaint, need to be sensitive, so that's question 1, okay. Question 2, which connects to the first part, as well as respecting cultural sensitivities, referring back to paragraph 2, can understand an outsider also understand what's speaking the language? I've answered the question, no. Authentic cultural experience, as I say, only superficial understanding of any culture. So, surface comprehension, superficial knowledge of culture, okay. Shallow, superficial knowledge of culture. Look at the conclusion again. I say we should respect the cultural practices, we should research before we go, and appreciate another culture. So that's the cohesion part. You know, everything is interconnected, linked. You can see there's a cohesiveness. There's no sections where you would read this and say, what is going on? Where did this come from? Now, this is a problem that I see quite often. People write as if the reader knows what they're writing. That's to say that during the process of writing, everything to our mind seems clear because we're writing it. Oh, this makes sense. It's good. But we cannot assume that the reader knows what we're talking about. You've got to spell things out. What does this mean exactly? How does this connect? Where does this come from? If you don't, the cohesion part's gone. So you have to essentially treat the reader as an idiot. Don't assume they know what you know. Spell things out to make it plain. Okay, so that's the example. Now let's take a look at the student essay. Now, I have to say, this is not a bad essay. They could probably get 7.5, maybe 8, maybe. With this one, grammar and vocab are pretty good, but task achievement, cohesion, well, the cohesion part's not too bad. The coherence, as in, well, as we'll see, it's mainly task achievement. So let's look at the introduction first then. So, travelling is one of life's greatest pleasures, but people are often expected to adjust their behaviour according to the countries they go to. Okay, so that's more or less, when in Rome. But what I would have wanted, because, again, as I say, do you think it's possible? This essay will firstly discuss, well, it's not a discussion essay. It's not. It's asking, what do you think's a problem? I think the problem is. You're not writing a balanced essay. You're not looking at both sides. It's asking, what do you think is the problem? I think the problem is this, and this is why. It's not asking to say, but some people think that that's not a problem. It's not asking that. So, this essay will firstly, so there's no clearly expressed opinion here. It says, this essay will discuss main idea. 1, the importance of adapting and respecting local customs. So that's the main idea, which is for paragraph 2, good. But there's no clearly expressed opinion. And we don't want a discussion. We want you, well, the author, to tell us, the readers, what they think exactly. So it doesn't quite do that. Followed by an analysis. Well, we don't want an analysis. Again, it's not a discussion. It's not a discuss both views. It's not a comparison essay. It's, what do you think is this? What do you think is that? And that's it. So, introduction could be a little better. Okay. Now, let's have a look. Owing to the fact that every country has her own set of rules and traditions that determine whether or not certain behaviour is acceptable, people make every effort not to offend the native people. So, we need to watch what we're doing so we don't offend people. Okay. Many occasions where Westerners travel to the Middle East and they get arrested, sexual behaviour that would have otherwise been morally acceptable, I think is better, morally acceptable in the home countries. Okay, good. So, we have a clear statement. Every country has its own rules. We should observe them. We shouldn't try and offend people. And it's talking about a specific thing, indecent sexual behaviour, that is not acceptable in some countries. Okay, so far so good. Now, however, this is not to say that people ought to change their principal values and beliefs, which is kind of contrary to what the previous sentences were talking about. The previous thing said that, you should not offend people, you should behave as they do. But so this is kind of contradictory, which we don't need, and it doesn't work. This is not to say that people, well, I thought you were saying, the author was saying that they should change. They should not be indulging in indecent sexuality. So, okay. Nevertheless, displaying considerations towards the local. Now, this is somewhat repetitive. It basically says the same as sentence 1. So it's a bit of a, so we've got the first couple of sentences are pretty good. Okay, this is this and this is that and here's an example. But then we've got a slight contradiction which doesn't quite fit. And then displaying concern, then we've got the same idea repeated more or less. So it isn't bad, but it could have been, so I would have been tempted to put the example at the end of the paragraph and put some, put a sentence or two more to develop this idea before introducing the example. So let's take a look. Now, my main cause of concern is with paragraph 3, because there's several different ideas in this paragraph. Now, we only need one. As I've said on several videos, you only need one main idea a paragraph, because the criteria is asking you to present, extend, support your main ideas. In other words, sentence 1, main idea, deep understanding about your culture. Sentence 2, develop it by giving a reason. Support it with a specific example. So if you've got 3 different ideas in a paragraph, you can't really do that. You don't have time or space. So there are many ways a person can gain deep understanding of the new culture. However, this will be highly unlikely if they do not make any effort to learn the language associated with it. A language serves as a means of communication, and the way people express their thoughts can be a vital source of information about their customs and traditions. It's kind of similar. It's a little different, but it's not so distinct as to move the argument, well, the ideas along. In addition, learning a new language is a good way of immersing ourselves into the culture. Isn't that the same, more or less? So you've got 3 sentences here that are pretty similar. They're not completely identical, but they're pretty similar. They don't really move things on as the criteria is calling for, a logical progression. So it doesn't quite work there. Now, if people are able to converse with the local or with the locals or with a local, they tend to be more willing to show and share about their daily lives. Okay, that's a different idea. And then finally, a great proportion of cultural books. Then there's a completely new idea about reading books. So, and there's no specific example. Now, we had an example in paragraph 2. I would have maybe made it a little more specific and made up some facts. A recent survey said that 50% of people do this, but at least it's an example. But we don't really have a clear example here, and we've got a couple of different ideas. So we're talking about, learning a language, how they speak. Okay, then learning a new language. So there's a bit of similarity between these 4 sentences. It's not really moving things on. And then we've got a new idea which is not developed. It's just, and finally, if you don't read a language, then you can't read some books. Okay, all right. So let's look at the conclusion. In conclusion, for reasons to ensure the convenience person stay abroad, it is essential that they adapt, conducting offensive behavioural activities. Okay, good. Okay, so the conclusion's good. I mean, 352 words, it's a little bit long, but the conclusion's good. Conclusion's good. Introduction's could be a little better, but but it's not bad. Paragraph 2's good. A bit of contradiction there. Paragraph 3, it could be better because we've got a few, we've got some sentences that's very similar and we don't really move things on. Then you've got that thing about, and there's books. So, it's not bad. grammar and vocab are good, but task achievement. The cohesion part's not too bad. I mean, it just kind of, the introduction and the conclusion are good. They refer back to each other, and the main ideas are there. So the cohesion part's good. It's mainly task achievement that this essay would fall down on. So there's no real clear introduction when it's really asking for it. What else did I say? There's no clear introduction. We need an outline sentence, really. We need a specific example, paragraph 3. So it's not too bad, but it could be a couple of minor tweaks and it could be better. Okay, so that's it. That's not too bad. I'll put these files on my blog, and you can find them at IELTS.com. I shall load this onto YouTube in a bit. So that's my website. If you have any questions, you can write to me, Kevin at PrepareIELTS. Kevin at PrepareIELTS.com. So if you have any videos that you want to, if you have any essays you would like me to make a video about, you can send them over. Right, great. You'll find all these files on the blog. I'll see you later. Bye for now.